exploding cats. So.
We have the lawyer.
But, all right, other questions.
All right. Orange shirt.
Oh, me?
Yes.
Okay. Oh man, now
No business, Tinder, no wrong questions,
so
right?
back to the earlier topic about like people not understanding games. Do you think that maybe the reason we're having such a hard time describing games is because we don't have a full grasp of how to describe emotions in general? How it's like there's all different kinds of happiness or sadness, and when we play games, they're about having emotions and experiences, and we don't know how to translate that to. We just say like it feels good. When we try to describe how it feels, other people get entirely different ideas of what that emotion feels like. So when we're trying to, the communication is getting messed up because we don't know how to understand like the very things like emotions in general.
It might also be that the people that generally are going to be saying that, like they're saying these things about games and why they don't like them, they're probably not super experienced with games, and the experience they have is the very like foundation layer, like okay, lots of shooters, lots of everything else, and so they're seeing that reel going in your head as you're trying to describe to them the emotions like sadness and longing or all these other things, and they're not seeing a connection between the things the video reel they're playing in their head of what they've seen in GTA and everything else, and what you're saying, and so it does not make sense to them. So there's not a lot of like frame of reference for them.
It's like the emotion. It's like you play games for different reasons, or for the emotions you're having, or why you play, or why you enjoy certain different games. And since we can't like describe ourselves, it's like. And when we get private about that too, it's like we don't want to say like all the things we feel about something, and it gets really like lost in translation a lot.
We also don't have a lot of practice.
Yeah.
Because, for example, we'll often shorthand and say an FPS is fun. An FPS makes you feel powerful and adept, right? That's very many of the FPS I've designed. That was our goals. But we don't state that, right? We don't have the training. We're not used to talking in that manner. So I think that's part of the problem too. But I'm sorry, I interrupt you. When I'm tired, I get super interrupty. Everybody just re-interrupt me if you're talking. Just talk over me.
You're actually hitting on the exact same point I was going to mention, that we don't have the language established that other mediums have, where people have been writing about films and books and art for hundreds of years in some cases, and there's an established language and words that are used to describe things. And gaming is still such a new medium in a way. It's still a baby. It's still very young. We're toddlers in the scheme of things.
But one thing to add to that too is
that kind of language established.
Say again?
Even wine tasting has that kind of language.
Exactly.
yeah. Well, one thing to add to that is that gaming has really been around. It's one of the oldest forms. You look, deer play games. A lot of other animals play games to avoid predation and other things. But it's things that are relegated to children or armies and war games.
Yeah.
So those two areas have the vernacular for it, but we don't as adults.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it's,
Absolutely
and
right.
even within like medium that have that additional language like film, even depending on the individual you're talking to, there are still plenty of people who you can try to use those terms with people describing a movie, and they'll say it was good or bad, and that's literally as far as they,
Yes.
and they couldn't even explain why. So in some cases, that may not help.
Right, and I was gonna go on to say that, well, like, from my experience, like, from subjects I've touched into learning, I found that, like, sorry, it's just,
That's right.
so, like, as I understand it, I actually learned a whole lot about video games from, like, researching spirituality, actually. And it's a strange kind of, like, realization that when there's this group of people that are trying to understand, like, emotions in general and experiences, and the way they understand it is, like, something I see is actually incredibly invaluable for video games as an entire genre. And I think that, like, no one's discussing it. No one thinks that emotions are that hard to describe or that we're generally understand them. But I think that after diving into that, it's such a crazy complex idea of understanding your mind and consciousness and potential ideas about the entire universe in general. And then you realize that games actually can be very spiritual experiences. And it's something no one really has ever, like, I've never seen that discussed. And I actually think it could be really important.
Well, it's funny that you say that because when I was coming up in the industry, I mean, there were no video game programs in universities, and before I started, really focusing on like game audio and audio technologies, I started off in game design and game production, and myself and a lot of my colleagues, Richard Le Marchand, who did the Uncharted series at Naughty Dog, were philosophy majors.
I'm a classics major. I mean, everybody I know, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, I minored in classics.
There we go.
So, because philosophy, you know, teaches you how to think and analyze and logic systems
Yeah,
and
like
the level
how to have
design.
control over things. Like in a game, we have control over a character, and we get this immediate feedback when we collect a point. Oh, I did that. I had the control, and I was able to control my existence. And it's like that's what spirituality actually teaches a lot. And it's like this kind of realization that a lot of people that I know don't actually feel like they have a lot of control in like their life. And it's really interesting how I was seeing all these connections, and I think it's like such a deep topic to like try to make all these connections.
There's a game that I've heard of at an earlier panel that I think might actually be what you're looking for. Is that the Obscuratory panel on
Yeah, the
obscure games?
The Eastern one.
well,
the,
yes.
Yeah.
What was it called?
Eastern Temple something?
Yeah, Eastern
Temple
Temple.
something?
Was it Temple of the Eastern Nine?
Eastern Mind.
Yeah.
And this was a lot about that panel, which was really interesting. Was that?
It was the game where if you're immortal, you lose. Or it's like, because it's about dying and reincarnation, and it was so crazy how obscure that was and how big the game was. I was like, I do want to get my hands on that. It sounds really hard though.
Hey.
So the copy was like $500 or something.
To get a physical copy.
Physical. Yeah, that's it. And
Thank you.
it's like, it just feels like a very unexplored area that I think could have a lot of answers that no one has tried.
I think the only reason we haven't tried them is, I mean, you talk about these credits panel is, I mean, if you want to get into making games or making anything, you have to have more world experience. 'Cause, I mean, like, there certainly is nothing wrong with like going straight into like a degree for like computer science and stuff if you want to get into like designing games, but I've heard from so many people that the perfect minor to go with almost any degree for any reason is always psychology.
Yeah,
And there's a ton of minors like that where like,
And like, not only psychology, that, back to the extra credits episodes where, like, I know it was a little controversial with the discussion of fate in video games, where, fate.
Controversial, you say.
Fate is, it's certainly like also a topic that people are so different on, and no one has a clear grasp of what it is, and that's why we argue. Like, we all think of it as something, but we don't have
class or, you know, an anthropology class, I'm like, that's terrific. Because the way I see it is that, you know, being narrow, it's not good for you as a person, it's not good for the industry, and even like looking just at something like the field of like video game audio and like sound design itself is a very multidisciplinary field. Yeah. To be a terrific sound designer, you don't want to just study audio production and engineering. You want to like understand, of course you understand acoustics, but then you want to understand literature and fine arts and sculpture and psychology and philosophy and anthropology and ecology and storytelling and bring that all in to your sound design. That's what makes a great narrative. And the folks, you know, sometimes there's a lot of stagnant stuff going on in game audio, and it's because too much of being narrow-minded. So we've got to think outside the box and study everything and bring in a lot of our experiences and really start to break through barriers.
And I think in general, like, we don't realize we can be narrow-minded on a subject because we have a whole, like, worldview of a subject, and we don't, like, we see everything in it, and we think it's complicated enough, we can't even fathom what's even shifting the paradigm to something much bigger than what we can realize. It's like, I think games have that way of, like, teaching that, like, of, like, making you perform or, like, making you experience, like, something to realize bigger, different perspectives and arguments.
Well, and I think that as we craft them, it is absolutely our responsibility. I mean, our job as developers is to create experiences, and you can't do that without having experiences, without understanding the human experience. And so as much as we focus on the technical side, it is another aspect we need to focus on. But I want to make sure we get to some other questions. So.
All right, go over this side this time. You, sir. Yes, you.
Rock, paper, scissors for it. Go, rock, paper, scissors.
Red flannel. Here, yeah. Yeah.
Ah, you ruined all my fun.
So, the current series on making your first game has been really great. A lot of good information there. But for somebody like me, I went through a gaming program. I've made a bunch of games already, but I'm coming but now that I'm out of college, I'm looking to make my first, for lack of a better term, professional game.
Can I try to what programs you use? What programs you use to make your games? Which program did you use?
Well, a lot of them. I did not use any one. But to
Get out there.
But yeah, like for my first professional game, how do I, like, what advice from that episode, how would those episodes apply to somebody like me?
So the 4th episode in the series we're doing right now, I think will be much more useful. So 2 more weeks, I think. But preview time. Okay, so
Sneak peeks, yay!
tell me. So you were looking sort of as an independent developer.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about the game you're thinking about building.
Oof, okay.
This is the first
Elevator
part.
pitch.
I need you to have that right, because if you're going to talk to the media, if you're going to be as an independent developer, you're going to be doing all of this. That is right. That's it. So my next question is, what platform do you want to put it on?
Currently PC.
Okay, so define PC, because there's a lot of ways. Are we talking a downloadable exe? Are we talking Flash? There's a lot of different ways we could put this out.
Steam was probably going to be my first response there, if I can navigate that.
And this is one of the things that you need to be thinking about. I mean, if it's your first professional release, you're going to have to figure out, okay, how is it that I get through Greenlight, right? If that's where I want to do it. Is there a different avenue? The only reason I've done things like Flash, right? There are plenty of indie developers. Super Meat Boy, right? Flash game before it was anything else. He built an audience there, and then his path to getting through all these barriers was to point and say, hey, I've gotten 100 million people to play this game already on some other servers. So you really have to think about something. But okay, so we're going downloadable exe. What is your target audience? Who do you think this game appeals to?
That's a very good question.
And that's okay, right? And especially because if you're doing something innovative and new, sometimes you won't have answers to that, but it's something that just put on the back burner of your brain as you're building this thing out over the next couple of months, because when you craft in Steam, you get like 3 screenshots and maybe a paragraph of text to get somebody to want to buy your game versus to move on. And as a small indie game, there's literally dozens of games a day released on it. And so you need to understand, when I'm crafting that text, part of this experience is understanding who it's for, right? What human being am I trying to create an experience for? Because we're not creating that experience on the screen, we're creating an experience for the person sitting in the chair in front of the screen. Okay.
Keep it on the back burner. Definitely don't let it control the entire design of your game. Of course.
Okay.
Important to remember.
So next thing is, how many people are on your team?
Working on that. It's a complicated thing. I'm hoping to have, I do know it's going to be a fairly small team, probably no more than 5.
Okay, and I think that any more than about 4 or 5, I mean, I'm sure you've seen this with student teams and that sort of thing, where you may not have the management skills. Mm-hmm. It just gets too complicated. I know plenty of people who think, oh, we're gonna grab 20 people and we're gonna make an awesome game. Those games always fall apart. 4 or 5 person team is much better, even if it's smaller. Really figure out early who's focused and who's dedicated to this. It's harsh, but fire early. Everybody is better off if you let somebody go who's not really pulling their weight, because otherwise they're gonna feel bad about it throughout, they're gonna drag the project, all this sort of thing. It's just cleaner and better, and I know it sucks, I know it's horrible, I know I sound like an evil person, but you'll be happier for it, and they'll be happier for it. With these people, really start digging in, figure out their skills, and you have to build this project around their skill set. Whatever initial design you have, make sure your initial design is flexible enough that you can modulate it a little bit to fit the team you have and the time you have. How much time do you have? Can you work on this full time as the first thing, or do you need a job as well?
I definitely need a job as well at this time, because I still like
Broke, right, I get it. No, it's no problem. And that's totally fine. Just make sure you don't, it's very easy to lose focus, it's easy to let the rest, like, if this is what you're passionate about, if this is what you really want to do, that goal is going to seem really far away. make sure you find some way, whether it's scheduling or some other like personal discipline, but just make sure that you are moving those goalposts forward every week. Because it's very easy to let 1 week turn into 3 weeks, turn into 2 months, and then your project disintegrates, right? Maybe even put somebody who has who can commit to it full time, if they're good at scheduling and management, this sort of thing, to be the person who kicks you to do more work, because it's going to be hard, right? What you're doing, you're saying, I'm going to take on a full-time job on top of a full-time job. And that's great. I mean, you'll do it. If that's the case, you may want to, again, create a smaller experience, because you will learn a great deal just from shipping a game for the first time, right? How to go through Greenlight, how to do marketing, how to get in funds, right? I have to start an LLC, all these sort of things.
If you don't mind.
Speaking of having started, well, this is great. It's doing
Stereotypes aside, no, there are, when someone comes to me, I want to start this project, here are the things you have to have. 1, figure out who's going to own it. If that's you as a person, that's fine. If you don't have money to incorporate or LLC or whatever, that's fine. But figure that out and know what your options are. Where do you live? Where do you live? State.
Virginia.
Okay. I don't know about Virginia Corporation. No, that's fine. I can't like say, oh, you should do this or that. But figure out what your options are. Is incorporate an LLC? If it's a partnership with your people, and you all have some sort of stake in it, figure it out. If it's not, even if it is going to be everyone gets a share of the pie, you need to have a copyright assignment contract and get them to sign it before they start doing anything at all. So you or the company or whoever owns this thing owns the everything. Otherwise, even if they give you everything later on, they can take it back after 35 years. And that might not seem like a long time. Donkey Kong was released almost 35 years ago. Imagine if you could get back Mario. And how much money you would have to get Nintendo to pay you for those rights back. Get a non-disclosure agreement, because you're telling someone this sounds like a cool idea. You can't protect that idea. And if you tell someone all about your game, they can go do it themselves and put a story on top of it and graphics and their own stuff, and you have nothing. There's not much you can do about that, probably. Unless you haven't signed the contract where they promise never to do that. Not never, but you get the idea. Also, do you have a name for this? It's okay if you don't.
Nope.
Fine. When you come up with a name, trademark search. This can be, you Google it first. Make sure you see who's using this in what context. Go to Patent Trademark Office, uspto.gov. You can do a trademark search. Just put it in, see what comes up. Think of synonyms, put those in, see what comes up. If there's another game on that's been using for 5 years, you never find out, pick a different name. If there's something really similar, pick a different name.
Person's last name, pick a different name.
Yeah.
So, and this is really good advice in a lot of ways. I mean, honestly, more than even just Mario, that you may get lucky, you may make Mario. But the real issue, to me, that I've seen come up with a lot of small teams is they don't do this, and I advise any students I work with all this sort of thing. Because imagine you get these 5 people, right? And 4 of them are great.
I get them all the time.
There we go. But 4 of them are great. And one of them, after 3 weeks, gets a job offer from Microsoft and decides, I'm going to go off to my... Do they own 20% of your company, right? Forever? Because they worked on it for 3 weeks? Make sure that when you build the corporate structure, you have all that worked out, because if you do that up front, then it's really easy. Everybody just points to the paper and says, yeah, that's what happens. Okay, I have to give back my 20%. Sure, fine, I'm going to go do my Microsoft gig. You don't have that written somewhere, then you guys are starting fighting about it, and it gets ugly, it drags down the whole thing, and it's just way simpler when no one has any interest, when there's no conflict, to establish all that stuff beforehand.
Yeah, as a colleague said, do it when you're happy and hungry. You're happy because you have this great idea, you're going to do it, it's going to be awesome. You're hungry because everyone's broke and you haven't made a dime off of this yet because you haven't started. And that's the time to do it.
Be careful and really think it through if you're going into business with your friends.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Be very, very careful about that. You probably don't want to.
And going to visit with friends, like on TV. Getting on TV, every time people go and do things with their friends, it always ends in misery.
and mishaps.
It depends on the situation of the friends, but
Get the
careful.
contracts done, because yeah, what I've heard is from friends who are making companies together, like, but we all love each other, we're friends. I'm like, well, now you are.
Right.
But wait till like money starts coming in and other things happen. You're like, oh no.
Then
And sure
suddenly you're
enough,
Thunderdome.
when it happens, yeah.
It always ends in Thunderdome.
Money
Isn't
changes
that,
people.
isn't that show Empire on Fox exactly like that?
Probably.
not familiar with it,
So a couple of other quick things. NDAs, I agree that you should absolutely have one. It makes you seem professional. I'm going to give the opposite. Don't worry, you are too small. If people want to steal from you, they will, and you have nothing you can do about it. So you are actually better off. Show it to publishers, show it to people, show it to, if there's an indie developer who might be willing to tweet about it when it comes out, show them your game, get them into it. Don't worry, don't be afraid of people stealing it, because if they can make it faster and better than you, they should be making it.
One caveat, you should at least understand NDAs, because if you go to talk to publishers or you go to start to talk to more people, many of them will make you sign one. I can't count how many NDAs I've signed, probably, I don't know, a couple dozen a year.
you're not allowed to tell us.
Yeah, but there's things to look out for, like you want to make sure that it has a good limit, like 3 to 5 years. If they say you have to keep this secret for the rest of your life, that's an undue burden, so it makes it weak. There's all sorts of, he can give you a much better
It might
description
even
of
be
all that.
valid, so both signing it and writing it up, it has to be reasonable, because we want people to be able to make a living. You're not allowed to work in this field, you've spent all your life in for the rest of your life. No, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't matter if they signed it in blood, it doesn't matter.
And I mean, there's a lot of other things like what jurisdiction any arbitration is going to go to,
Yeah.
all this stuff. But I mean, honestly,
Read your contracts, by the way.
read any contract that's given to you. You will not have the money or resources necessary to fight these, right? Like if you want to quibble over the various NDAs, you're going to just blow through a ton of money. As much as I would love to see that money go to my esteemed colleague. So do it, absolutely. Read your contracts, know your contracts, get a good NDA, but also don't be so afraid, because there's so many people I know who keep their projects secret, don't show anybody, and then when it's either not ready because no one ends up having seen it and having given them feedback, or it's not ready because by the time they're ready to release, no one cares, no one's ever heard of it.
Don't be afraid to cross out things in contracts or negotiate them. If someone presents you with one, that doesn't mean it's written in stone. Fire access, great example. I walked in there one day with another guy from George Mason. Both of us, they handed us the NDA, and we both said, wow, this is awful, we can't sign this. It had at least, we marked it up, we had like 6 different things each, and there was not a lot of overlap. We're like, this is the worst NDA we've ever seen. And the lady said, wow, we've been using this for 15 years. Nobody's ever complained.
Yeah, that happens sometimes.
Yeah.
Oh, why is that in there? Oh, I guess this is a modified form we used 10 years ago. I guess no one noticed that was in there. Okay, no problem.
All right.
It happens sometimes.
So because I know that there's some of you guys who are building these sort of games, I don't want to spend too much longer, but we can return to this in 20 or 30 minutes. I will answer the second half of your question because I think it's really good and I think it's really important that we talk about how you build your first game and then how you launch your first game.